I've got a problem up on the board for you folks to try. I want you to find the equation of the circle that has these 2 points, 0, -5, and 2, 4, at opposite ends of a diameter. Okay, so those are both points on the circle, and I'm telling you that the line segment connecting them is a diameter of the circle, so it will pass through the center. So it's a little bit of a puzzle. You're going to have to figure out what the center and radius are. Take a moment, pause the video, try to work that out, and then tune back in. We weren't explicitly told that we had to draw a picture, but I like pictures. They make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. All right, so 0, -5. That's just going to be 5 down on the y-axis. And 2, 4, we're going to go 2 over, 4 up. And we're told that those are endpoints of a diameter, so that line segment is going to pass through the center of my circle. So I want to use that information. Oh my goodness, that's not very round. I'm going to draw my circle here. That's a little better. Okay, so my circle looks roughly like that, and I want to see if I can figure out what's the center and then what's the radius. Okay, now the center is going to be what's halfway in between these 2 points. Now what that means is that the x value has to be halfway between 0 and 2, and the y value has to be halfway between -5 and 4. Now I can probably see by inspection that 1 is halfway between 0 and 2. Okay, but in general, what I can always do is just average them. That right there is the average x value. If I have 2 things, add them together, divide by 2, that's your average. You're probably familiar with that from grades. If you took 2 quizzes that were both worth 10 points, and you got a 10 on one and a 6 on the other, well, your average is an 8. 10 plus 6 is 16, divide by 2 is 8. Okay, and of course 8 is halfway between 6 and 10. Okay, so sometimes you might be able to see it by inspection, but you can always just average them. So same thing here, -5 plus 4 divided by 2, that's going to be my average y value. And so let's see, that's 2 over 2 is 1, as we said. That's -1 over 2 will be -1/2. Okay. Now, I drew a very rough sketch here, and it sort of looked like we passed through the point 1, 0. All that tells you, and this should come as no shock to you at this point in the semester, is that my pictures are not perfect. Okay. But that's reasonably close. I like having this picture because it does serve as a double check for me. If I had calculated and I had gotten that the center of my circle was at -3, 6, so that it's somewhere over here, I'd say, I don't think so. I think I made a mistake somewhere. So the picture can sort of serve as a nice double check. Okay, so now I need to find my radius. Now the radius is just the distance from the center to a point on the circle. Equivalently, it would be half of the distance of this diameter, which would connect these 2 points. I could work with either one. Let's go ahead and actually just do half of the diameter, because that way I'm working with integers as my coordinates rather than fractions. So my radius is going to be the diameter divided by 2. I'm going to go ahead and write that division by 2 at the very beginning, because otherwise I'm afraid I'm going to calculate the length of the diameter and then get everything wrong. Okay, so now I can come back over here to this picture. Now, to find the distance between 2 points, there's this thing called the distance formula. And I never bothered to memorize it. I could actually recite it right now, but that's because I accidentally memorized it. When I was first taught the distance formula, it was this horrid thing that had x's with subscripts and y's with subscripts and all of that. And I was sort of like, who needs that when you've got the Pythagorean theorem? The distance formula is just the Pythagorean theorem restated. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm looking for this distance. I'm going to view that as the as the hypotenuse of a right triangle. Okay, so I'm just going to call that D over here. Okay, and then what's this distance? Well, here we're at here we're at 0. Here the x value is 2. Looks like we're coming 2 over. Okay, notice I get that 2 as 2 minus 0. Now that happens to be positive. I could always put absolute values around it if I wanted to subtract the other way for some reason. Would be the absolute value of 0 minus 2. Okay, what's this vertical distance? Well, here we're 5 below the x-axis, and here we're 4 above it. Looks like this is going to be 9. And of course I could get that as 4 minus negative 5. Okay. All right. So I'm able to then say Pythagorean theorem, 2 squared plus 9 squared is equal to d squared. That's 4 plus 81 is equal to d squared. 85 is the diameter squared. The diameter will be the positive square root of 85. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to write that plus sign. I'm doing that as a visual reminder to myself to say if this were an algebra problem, there would be 2 answers, plus and minus the square root of 85. It's not an algebra problem. It's a geometry problem. The diameter is a distance. Distances are positive. So I'm choosing to take the positive square root. Okay. So my radius then will simply be that diameter, root 85 over 2. Okay. Now, when we are working with roots, we will want to try to simplify roots. However, this root doesn't simplify, and I wouldn't care if it did, because I'm thinking ahead. I'm going to be plugging into the equation for the circle, where I'm going to end up getting the radius squared. So I'm going to end up squaring this thing. Okay. So I don't care if I could simplify the root. It's actually simplest not to, even if it would simplify. Okay, so now I can go ahead and write in the equation for this circle. Okay, so it's going to be x minus 1 squared. So I'm subtracting the x value of the center, plus y minus a negative 1/2 will become y plus a half squared, is equal to, now I've got to square this. So that's root 85 over 2 squared. Do be careful when you're squaring a fraction. You have to remember to square the top and the bottom. So that will be x minus 1 squared plus y plus a half squared equals 85 over 4. When I square the square root of 85, I just lift the radical. 2 squared is 4. Perfectly fine to leave it in this form rather than multiplying things out. So that's our equation for that circle.